The following program contains views that are not those of WVTC, iNetworks Communications, their subsidiaries, affiliates, or financial supporters.
WBTC, reaching the world with positivity. Music to get you through your day. Winning victory through Christ is the only way.
Welcome to Pastor Church and the Law. We're back again. I have with me Attorney Rodney Howard, and we have some more information for pastors, church leaders, trustees, deacons, whoever's in charge of managing the affairs of the church. And so today we're going to talk about two things. How could you lose your 501c3 tax exemption status? What things would you do that would cause you to that you could do that will cause you to lose your tax status or place it in jeopardy? I know you want to know. I hope you already have a 501c3 for the church. That way, every contribution can be charitable. It depends on the amount, right?
No, it doesn't depend on the amount. It can be fully tax deductible.
All the money I give to the church.
Because the church is a tax exempt organization under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code.
So hold on.
We're living in our faith,
but under
the law.
So the law says you have to get a designation from the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, the people that scare you when it's time for you to file your taxes. Well, the reason people are asking you for their donation report every year so that they can get credit for donating to the church. So you want to make sure you maintain the 501c3 status, right?
Absolutely.
Every church should have one. If you don't, you need to consider applying for it. But if you do, you don't want to mess it up and lose it. So Attorney Howard, how could I lose my tax exempt status?
Well, there are several things that you have to consider. The IRS has initiated rules and regulations governing the participation by religious organizations in controversy and political activity. So no substantial part of the religious organization's activities can be in support of a political candidate or in support of political activities.
So number one, you cannot allow candidates to come across the pulpit on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Sunday afternoon, and ask for the church to support that particular candidate, right?
Absolutely.
Because if you do, that's considered quote unquote political activity. And you say, well, how will they know? I guarantee you everything you do is being monitored because everybody in your congregation has a cell phone. They take those cell phones out, they're videotaping. And if you're on the internet, which many of you are now since COVID, your service is public. It's being watched.
Broadcast, and it's being monitored.
Okay.
And certainly you don't want to be in a position where because of some controversial statement or some controversial candidate, your church's tax exempt status is placed in jeopardy.
So even if you have a member of your church running for office?
Absolutely. The church itself cannot endorse any political candidate.
Now, the pastor said, I want to endorse my friend Deacon Jones running for county commissioner.
Well, unfortunately, the pastor himself is not barred from making his own personal endorsement, but he has to say publicly, the church is not making any endorsement. I'm only stating my personal preference, and you are not bound to follow my personal preference. Now, again, the best way for the pastor to be able to communicate his own personal interests is to hold a candidates forum in which all of the candidates for a political office are brought to the church, and there's voter education being taken place, as opposed to the pastor giving you his own personal endorsements.
And so you don't want the candidates marching across the pulpit on Sunday morning or doing worship service, because then it appears that the church is making an endorsement in support of that or those candidates. I hope y'all hear me, because IRS will come and shut you down, take your 501c3, take your tax exemption, and will impact your tithes and offerings greatly.
There is a IRS publication, publication 1828, which gives all of the particulars in terms of things that are allowed and things that are prohibited for religious organizations to engage in.
So you can't invite just one candidate for office. Like you say, well, I don't believe in the other side. Well, you either going to have to invite the other side or leave your side at home. I hope y'all hearing us, because a lot of pastors have made that mistake and have had problems with the Internal Revenue Service, and you don't need that. You can have a candidates forum, which makes it educational.
The other thing that a church cannot do is collect finances on behalf of a particular political candidate. The church itself cannot be involved in supporting a particular political candidate. So the church cannot hold a rally on behalf of candidate so-and-so because they feel that that's the candidate that they want to support. The church cannot do that itself. The church can rent facilities to the candidates who want to use their facilities, but it cannot do a fundraiser on behalf of candidate X or Y.
You can't buy ads in the newspaper supporting your candidate. You can buy an ad saying, we're urging everyone to get out and vote in this election. You can do voter education. You can talk about the offices that are to be elected and why it's important to vote, how it impacts voters, but you cannot put a candidate's name in your church bulletin talking about XYZ is running for office, and this office is going to make sure that we have these things. No, don't do it. Don't use church website. But you can do some things. We're going to tell you what you can do.
A church pastor can present a sermon or a series of sermons addressing what the Bible says in connection with certain issues: abortion, criminal justice reform, sexual orientation, and other topics that have a spiritual dimension. That's permitted. What the church cannot do and what the pastor cannot do is actively lobby on behalf of a particular position extensively. Now, the IRS is kind of in the middle on this. They don't want to curtail religious doctrine, and they don't want to curtail the ability of the pastors to speak on those issues. However, when the church takes an absolute stand, then they are engaging substantially in the political activities in support of these particular issues. They can be seen to be participating in political activities.
So you have a trustee who is running for office at your church, loyal trustee, and the church wants to put the pictures of the trustee board members on the website. Can the church leave my picture up and I'm running for office?
No. Again, the church can put pictures up of the board of trustees.
Right.
But if
I'm on the board.
If you're on the board,
but I'm running.
The only designation they can say under that, the only caption they can say is member of the board of trustees.
Period.
Because they cannot make any indication that you are a political candidate.
And see, I want y'all to know this because this is going to happen. You're going to have somebody at your church running for office. You want to support them. You can personally give them your money. You cannot use the church building, website, any of its things to promote that particular candidate.
And you can't take up an offering on behalf of the candidate.
In church service. So these are things because you don't want to lose your tax exempt. And now the church can provide members of the church with information, educational materials about issues that are going to be on the ballot, like the legalization of marijuana. You could have that information distributed, what the pros and cons of legalizing marijuana. Those are public policy issues. You're not pushing and you're not supporting anything. You're just giving education for the membership. Got to keep thinking. Is this educational or is this promoting a particular person or a particular ideology?
And then the other thing is church employees, the church secretary, the church clerk, they cannot engage in campaign activities on behalf of a particular candidate either, because it's in the context of their employment that they are performing these activities. Now, if they want to participate in the candidate's campaign, they may have to take a leave of absence or do some volunteer work, but they cannot do that from the church office and using the church facilities.
Yeah, they can't sit at the church on the church's phone and start calling people. Are you going to vote for our candidate? Can't do that. Not at the church, and it will jeopardize your tax exemption. And I guarantee you, you have more people that will be paid by IRS to report you. That's how people get reported, because somebody gets paid to be a snitch.
Somebody drops a dime.
There you go. He said it, I didn't. What you can do is register voters. You can do voter education. You can do all of that in the church, from the pulpit, all day long. You can call people, say, have you registered and have you voted? Don't ask them who they voted for. Just, have you registered? Did you vote today? That kind of thing you can do.
You can urge people to come out and vote and participate in the election process.
Okay, I don't know. We can't talk no more about this. I wish we had more time. I hope y'all got it. Just check with a lawyer, check with IRS before you go doing different things.
And go to the IRS and get publication 1828.
1828 is free, and you can just download it and you'll get some of these rules that we share with you. The other thing we said we were going to talk about is when you hire a pastor, when you retain a pastor, I think we think too much about, you want the pastor to be everything, right? You want them to do what?
Well, they want them to preach first, but they also want him to be the chief administrator. And
so the chief executive officer.
Chief executive officer. In some instances, the pastors themselves believe that they should be the chief executive officer, but also we don't take into consideration their training or their experience in those areas. Some pastors have never run a business. They have never done those things which would enable them to be proficient in administering the church. They've never had employees. They don't know the rules of employment. You may have to have some other additional persons to support them in those areas where they don't have the training or experience.
Yeah, see, just because you have a person that's a great preacher, Bible teacher, that's good. But now who's going to develop the budget? Who's going to oversee the income and expenses of the church? Who's going to handle employee and employer disputes? Do you have an HR department? Do you just go get Mickey Mouse from somewhere and you come in, you my HR person? They don't know the rules of human resources. They don't know how to handle complaints within employees at the church. You may only have a couple, but we've had so many cases where these part-time people create a lot of legal problems for you. Give them some examples.
Well, most employees start out volunteering at the church, and then the church feels obligated to pay them some compensation. In some instances, they say that they want to at least pay them a travel allowance or expense, or they want to compensate them on a part-time basis. Ultimately, they become employees of the church.
So you're talking about employees. They're part-time and they're full-time. I know you think Mary Jane, who retired from her government job, is now available 5 days a week, half a day at the church. Is she an employee or a contractor?
If the church is paying her a salary, absolutely, she's an employee.
What's the difference? What's the difference between an employee and an independent contractor? Because some people, y'all, I know you don't know.
Well, unfortunately, we have too many people who don't want to pay payroll taxes, even though they're part-time employees. But if the church is directing where you work, what time you work, giving you the equipment to work with, and they're supervising your work, then you are an employee even if you're part-time. And that includes especially musicians. Unless the musician is holding him or herself out to be to the general public to and utilize their musical talents to more than one, and if they're giving the church an invoice for their performance or the things that they do musically, they will be considered by the IRS to be part-time employees, and payroll taxes will be due for their work.
So now here's the good news. Some of you have musicians that start with you, leave you, go this other place, and go 2 or 3 other places. You can consider them independent contractors. They must bill you, send you an invoice every month, every week, however you pay them. If they get paid by the week, you must have an invoice every week. Don't let them, since the musicians, many of them are holding churches hostage, and y'all can quote me on that, then you have to begin to treat them professionally. If you're going to be a musician for 3 other places or 2 another place and my church, you are an independent contractor. You pay your own payroll taxes, and you will have a contract with me, and you will send me an invoice before you get another check. Y'all with me?
And
are you with me?
The church has to issue to them a 1099
at the end of the year.
At the end of the year.
You have to do this. It ain't nothing matter, nothing business but the money. And same thing, you got drummers. How much do they have to make before they become part-time?
It's not the amount of money.
What is it?
It is the amount of time that they are engaged in the activity that they perform on behalf of the church, and whether or not they're being supervised by officials at the church. Usually you pay your minister of music, and he supervises the rest of the music staff. Mm-hmm. Well, once he is supervising those people, unless they have an independent contractor agreement, then they become part-time employees.
And the reason we keep trying to make the distinction, you're paying the payroll taxes for every part-time employee. Failure to do so causes the church some payroll tax liability. And you don't want to have any liability with the government at this time or any other time, but particularly at this time, right?
Absolutely. And the other thing that we have to keep in mind is we have a lot of people. I mean, nobody really wants to pay taxes, but
you will.
God has said, and Jesus has said, that you have to render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. Now, that means you should pay what you are legally obligated to pay, but you can't avoid it and say, well, I don't want to receive I want to receive cash, but I don't want to have any taxes taken out of what I receive.
Yeah, and that whole thing about give me cash, those are the same people that will come back on you if you don't have the cash that week, and will start filing lawsuits going to complain that the church is using them, not paying them for the work that they do. So you might as well start out with business. And you talked about the role of the pastor. Whose responsibility is it when you retain the services of a pastor. Do you expect the pastor to preach, teach, and grow the membership? Do you expect the pastor to increase funding for the church? What do you expect of one person? Are there other people that the pastor should be working with? You hire these new pastors. You don't know all of the church stuff. How much debt does the church have? How much of that do you expect the pastor to retire?
Or is the pastor in the position to assist the church in meeting its financial obligations? What role does he play in that? And what is the expectation of the church members? Many times we say, oh, he can really preach, but can he raise the money necessary for the church to meet its obligation?
Well, and the question you have to ask yourself is, you're going to be buying property, negotiating contracts. Is that the role that the pastor has? Or should he be a part of a team of people that negotiate contracts? Who is it that's going to help get new members? Last time I read, sheep get sheep.
And again, it's the obligation of all of us as church members to be missionaries, to spread the gospel. It's not just on the pastor. It should be all of us.
Because I hear people talking about the church ain't growing. I don't know what he's doing. What's she doing? How about you? Sheep reproduce sheep. Shepherds don't make sheep. They protect them, provide for them, nurture them, care for them. They do not reproduce sheep. That's what I heard. And then how do you make budgetary decisions? What's the best way to do that?
Well, that's an issue within each individual church.
So who should be on the committee?
Well, certainly people who have training and experience in fundraising, but also people who have the ability to communicate and network with the membership. Everybody should feel obligated to support the church. They may not all be able to do it to the same extent, but there should be a commitment to support the church, because the church cannot exist and it certainly can't thrive unless everyone is committed to supporting and helping the church grow.
So we hope that this has been helpful to you. I don't know how to help you any more than to tell you it's going to take more than any one person to do all of these things. The pastor is like head of a corporation, doesn't do everything. It is the guider, the person that brings the family together, brings the team together to move things forward. You cannot operate in silos, and you can't have these midnight thoughts and don't share it with the leadership team.
And certainly the leadership team has to be in constant communication, not only with the pastor, but also with the membership. How many members have received contact from the church or from some member of the church during the week or during the month or during the year? Many people go to church all year long and haven't heard anything from the church unless they make a personal appearance at the church. And even then, it's a howdy, howdy, and so long, so long.
That's because y'all don't listen to the announcements that are on the screen now.
Well, unfortunately, many of us, especially in this era of social media, we don't come to church except on those special days, Christmas and Mother's Day and Easter, the CMEs. But part of it is the idea that we're in this era where church attendance may or may not be a measure of how well you support the church. But church activity and sharing the good news about the church and the ministries of the church is something that every church member can and should do.
And so we encourage you to communicate more. That's sending emails to your members, letting them know what happened with, some people have regular meetings, others do not. Regular church meetings where members can get informed, but sending emails out, letting people know our membership at the beginning of the year was 30. It is now 60. It has doubled, and we're so grateful. Giving people information the more we learned in law practice 101 that every time you send a document to somebody, that's a contact, that's information. So if you text them, if you tweet them, if you email them, it lets them know they can't say, I had not heard anything from the church till the end of the year. And you don't want that to be.
And as members, you can call your other members.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, we're in this computer age now. Churches are going to emails, but we have a lot of older members who are not familiar with the email concept, and they are preferring to have some old style communication.
So that's why you all have class leaders in the AME church.
Well, we have class leaders.
We had group leaders in the Baptist church.
Well, but even so, you
Team
had someone responsible for
yeah.
contacting a group of members on a regular basis. And they're supposed to consider both the physical and spiritual health of each member in their class or in that group.
I agree. So we're just trying to help you with organization structure so that you don't have to have the church in court over foolishness. Remember, do not let any candidate go to the pulpit on any given Sunday evening, day or night, and try to promote themselves. And certainly, pastors, don't you try to endorse them from your pulpit. It's not based on race that they're taking pastors down. It has happened to Black, white, and other clergy who have done that. You don't want to lose your church, your tax status over that, and that person's not writing any checks in the first place.
And now, in this era where we have the government being taking the position that they're going to prosecute and persecute people that they feel are not loyal, we have additional reason to be very careful about how we go about our activities, especially because the IRS now is being politicized as well.
So remember, you're preaching, teaching, and worshiping in the shadow of Hitler. We will see you next week. We have another exciting program for you.
And we're still living in our faith, but under the law.